o'clock early this afternoon, but they are waiting very quietly, solemnly, sharing stories about John McCain with each other and with us. And there are a couple hundred people on this side of the street, and then there's also room for many, many more. We understand that they are going to let people continue cycling in line until about 8 o'clock, and then even if they are ready to close the rotunda, they're going to let anybody who is here in line still go in to pay their respects. Brett.
Peter, thanks. Cooled things down with that rain a little bit better than Arizona, where it was really hot. Some of those people in line waiting for hours had to get some water and cooling stations, and the family actually went out in Arizona and talked to them, thanked them for being in that heat to say their final goodbyes.
Interesting that the man who was saying that he served on the same ship as John McCain, the USS Forrestal carrier, where John McCain's plane caught on fire. It was hit. 130 people died on that carrier, and John McCain did not. He obviously made it through that horrific accident, and he really made it through a number of very difficult moments in his life. When he was shot down over Hanoi into the lake in the middle of Hanoi, they thought he wouldn't survive the night when he was pulled out of there, Byron.
He was a huge believer in luck.
Yes, he said he's the luckiest man in the world, right?
A lucky coin, a lucky hat. Actually, his grandfather was too on board ship in World War II. He had a lucky hat, and it would fly off his head, and the crew would grab it lest it go overboard, because that's the lucky hat. McCain had kind of an odd definition of luck in the sense that all these terrible things happened to him, but they didn't kill him, which was huge. The fire was unbelievable. It actually, a missile struck McCain's plane. There is video of McCain climbing out on the refueling probe of the airplane and jumping onto the deck, which was on fire. He makes that, and then shortly after that, he volunteers to go to another aircraft carrier, the Oriskany, and the next month he's shot down. I mean, this was just an incredible series of events, but he came out of it all very superstitious, big gambler, but believing a lot in luck.
It's really interesting. Many people have told the stories this week of when they were on an airplane with John McCain and it would grow turbulent, and he just would chuckle and tell them, if you're flying with McCain, no one dies. He knew he was not going to go in a plane.
He did crash a few planes.
In a plane wreck. But I wanted to read something from Jack, who tweeted a beautiful photo of his dad's naval jacket, his leather jacket, this week on the day that the senator died. And he wrote on Saturday night, "It's not the man that was great, but instead it was his desire to serve a cause greater than himself that defined his life. To me, he was a giant, but to him, he was an imperfect servant of the nation he loved deeply." So his family continues, and his dearest friends, to emphasize that John McCain was always the first to
fill the seat of retiring Jeff Flake. This is an emotional remembrance, but there are obviously politics involved, Chris, and now you have a decision by Arizona Governor Doug Ducey to fill this seat with someone from Arizona, and how he chooses, who he chooses, will make a difference, as some important votes, including the Brett Kavanaugh decision, are pending.
Well, that's right, and he has a kind of a balancing act, because on the one hand, there's a very active Trump base among Republicans in Arizona, as there is a very active Trump base among Republicans everywhere, and he wants to give them someone that they'll be satisfied with. But I think he also feels keenly that he wants to appoint somebody who the McCain family, not that it's their seat, but that they will be at least satisfied with or not dissatisfied with. That could be a little bit hard to square those two. And interestingly enough, according to one report, McCain had said that he would like to be replaced by a Hispanic woman. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I'm not sure how many prominent Hispanic women there are in the Republican Party in Arizona, but that gives you an indication of the kind of balancing act that Governor Ducey has to do while he is running for re-election as well in November. But you would think that he's going to have to appoint somebody, and appoint somebody promptly. That will restore, because of course, while John McCain has remained a senator, he has been absent since last December. So the Republican majority has been a bare majority of 50 votes to 49 Republicans, and John McCain missing, not taking a single vote all year. This will restore a 2-vote majority priority for Republicans, and you would assume that Ducey has said he's not going to do it until John McCain is buried on Sunday, but one would assume early next week he will name somebody to replace John
And
McCain.
there's some reporting that he's going to talk to the family and Cindy McCain in particular and say, I need you to sign off on this choice, whoever it is.
The other area that you're going to see a lot of change is on these committees, because he was the very strong chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the next logical person in line is James Inhofe. And then you look at the other Senate Foreign Service Committee, which is likely to, Bob Corker's leadership role, likely to go to Bill Frisch. Both of those men are very strong Trump supporters. And when you look at the legacy that is left behind in his committee work, AB, the face of that is likely to change.
Oh yeah, the Republican Party is no longer the party of Ronald Reagan and John McCain and others. It's the party of Donald Trump, and so there's a recognition not only in what will change in the Senate, but in Arizona and nationwide, that we are trending towards things that he spoke out against: isolationism, protectionism, nativism. It's a very strong division, but one that has been definitely overwhelmed by the power of the Trump agenda and the Trump presidency, and this will be a very interesting part of the Governor Ducey's challenge, because there will be criticism from either side, no matter what he does.
And Arizona has been a real battleground of that. They're going to have 2 new senators very, very soon. Trump didn't win Arizona by a lot. I think it was a little less than 4 points. But Jeff Flake's just tremendously negative reaction to, almost emotional reaction to the president has kind of defined his political career. Obviously, McCain had a much longer legacy, but if you go back and look at McCain's reaction to Donald Trump, there was kind of an escalating series of potshots they were taking at each other until Donald Trump finally went nuclear in June, I think, of 2015 in Iowa, when he said that McCain was a hero because he was shot down and he likes people who were not shot down. And of course, things were terrible ever after that. But the fact is, Trump is now president. The Republicans in Arizona are going to want, I think, a senator who basically goes along with the Trump agenda.
Do we have the other soundbite of John McCain in that speech, because he speaks specifically to what we're talking about here? If we could get a listen to that.
Our deliberations can still be important and useful, but I think we'd all agree they haven't been overburdened by greatness lately. And right now, they aren't producing much for the American people. Both sides have let this happen. Let's leave the history of who shot first to the historians. I suspect they'll find we all conspired in our decline, either by deliberate actions or neglect. We've all played some role in it. Certainly I have. Sometimes I've let my passion rule my reason. Sometimes I made it harder to find common ground because of something harsh I said to a colleague. Sometimes I wanted to win more for the sake of winning than to achieve a contested policy.
He's clearly sending a message today with all of this, Chris Wallace, the joint laying of these wreaths, but it doesn't look like his dream of unifying the Senate or unifying what's happening on Capitol Hill is any closer to reality, certainly at this point.
No, I have to say that I was struck. I didn't realize this was specifically John McCain's request, as Brett indicated, but I was struck by seeing Schumer and McConnell, the 2 Senate leaders, Republican and Democrat, and then Pelosi and Ryan coming up behind the wreaths. And what was so striking, there was was a time when that would have seemed very much a matter of course. But to see the two leaders of the parties in the Senate and in the House stepping up together in concert, both of them solemn, both of them the same mood, rather than taking shots or elbowing each other, is a rarity today. And that's the sad part of this, is that is what our politics has devolved on. I know that earlier Bill Bennett said, well, some of the compromises he went for were bad compromises, and I fully understand why people would think a lot of the things that he pushed for, but is it any better to achieve nothing? Because it seems so often now that the major problems of the country, whether it's immigration or entitlement reform or debt or deficit, nothing gets done. And I'm not blaming Republicans or Democrats. It's just the total dysfunction, the total to use a word that John McCain used, tribalism of our politics today that is so dispiriting.
But I will say that one of the reasons President Trump won was because people were sick of both parties, and they said, kick the table over and try something different. And it's just an interesting time if you think about it. What you're talking about will be visible tomorrow at the service at the National Cathedral, and you have former President Obama and former President George W. Bush delivering eulogies back to back. Two men who beat John McCain in the presidential contest. Mike Emanuel is right outside, and he has some thoughts. Mike, you covered this guy. Your thoughts on this day?
Well, Brett, some of what was striking to me was the comments in some of those speeches played off themes I've been hearing all week. One, that if John McCain was on your side on a particular issue, there was no fiercer advocate for that position. And if he was on the other side, there would be no fiercer opponent. And so you heard some of that in some of the remarks there from Majority Leader McConnell. Also, his legendary stamina when he went overseas to see our men and women in uniform. Lawmakers were telling me that they would go for 18, 20-hour days. McCain would find out someone else was available. He'd squeeze in another meeting and seem to have endless, boundless energy when it came to our men and women in uniform, and also forcing a little bit of bipartisanship. As Chris has been discussing, you guys have been talking about the lack of function here on Capitol Hill, but forcing the leaders of the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate and the House to lay wreaths together to try to bring both sides together, at least for a moment. Brett?
Thanks, Mike. Having covered the Pentagon, he's the only guy, Senator McCain is, who could make grizzled generals shudder to have to testify in front of the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
So we'll continue our coverage of the McCain Memorial after a short break. First, some of the sites.